Good day and God bless everyone. I am Angela de la Cruz Villarreal, a second-year BSP student. So today, let me share and discuss to you the ethical philosophy of Saint Thomas Aquinas, the natural law. So before I proceed to the main point of this topic, let me introduce to you first Saint Thomas Aquinas. So Saint Thomas Aquinas was an Italian Catholic priest who belongs to the religious order of preachers or Dominicans, and one of the most important medieval philosophers and theologians. He was born in 1225 at Rucasica, near Aquino, about halfway between Rome and Naples. His early studies were under the tutelage of the Benedictine abbot of Monte Cassino, but at the age of 14, Aquinas enrolled at the University of Naples. He was deeply impressed by the Dominicans whom he later met at the university. So in 1244, at the age of 19, he decided to join the order of preachers. After the struggle with his family, who did not agree with his being a priest, was finally settled, in 1248, Thomas decided to study with Albert the Great in Cologne. After Albert recognized that his student Aquinas was a genius, so he took Thomas with him to the University of Paris, and later Thomas became the Master of Theology in the University of Paris in 1256. And the remaining 18 years of his life were spent on lectures, instructions, writings, and codiplats, the tradition of answering questions posed by participants who were in dialogue somewhat akin to the ancient symposiums of the Greeks. So, in March 7, 1274, Thomas died, leaving behind him notable works like Summa Centra Centellis, Summa Theologians, and De Veritate. The Catholic Church also honors him as a doctor, a title given to saints who are recognized as giver of particularly important insight in the understanding of Christian doctrine or faith. So let's proceed to the Estudios non Derator. So Thomas Aquinas begins from the standpoint of faith. Aquinas' perspective presupposes the existence of a God who is the author or the source and the goal or the end of all reality. So for Thomas, this creator related in freedom with the human person and so enables him or her in freedom to recognize through reason the very principle of foundation of all things. So this foundational knowledge, the human person can choose to act in such a way that is worth of one's very reality. So the philosophy of Saint Aquinas, which is the natural law, is based on the Christian faith and believing in one God and morality that this creator is trying to tell us, or the believers. So according to Saint Thomas Aquinas, we have that ability to know the highest good. We engage in freedom in choosing to act on the good that we ought to do. And every one of us knows to do good and avoiding this evil or wrongdoing. For Aquinas, God reveals his goodwill as the eternal law reflected in the order of reality. Relating with the law as governing all is relating with God himself, whose will emanates to govern all that is. The reality then of life as growth, nutrition, and reproduction is founded on the will that is eternal. Even the reality of sensitive that is true of animals is also accordance with same will. That plants persist to fullness of being plants is an imprint of the governing will that comes to human understanding as law. That animals governed by instinct behave in such and such a way is also recognized by the human person as following the dictate of a law that guides all of creation. So God created us which reflects the personality, and good. So we have also to do those things that is good. And since we are created in God's image, we also have to share the goodness with others. We have to make sure that we know how to treat those people around us and also all living things on our surroundings. Human freedom for St. Thomas Aquinas, therefore, is an imprint of the divine will in the very being of the human person. This sharing of human reason is the eternal will, or divine law is for him or her the natural law. The relationship between the eternal and natural law for him or her is expressed in the sacred book of Christians, those since the creation world God's invisible will, his power and his nature has been clearly seen being understood from what has been made visible so that people are without excuse. So the divine will, according to this quote, can be understood as governing all that is. Man's task is to act such a way that his or her participation is the full unfolding of nature directs to fulfillment. So from the very start is clear and understood what God has made that has been visible so that everyone has no excuse. We don't know that there is only one God and we should also follow him, his commandments. We are here now to fulfill those objectives in life, why we are here today to continue living. This ethics of natural law has gained wide acceptance at one point in the history of Western civilization that it has come to be espoused, even if one presents from the faith system that has engendered it. Este Dios non diratur is an expression that highlights the validity of this eternal system with or without faith in the Creator God. Literally, et si Dios non diratur means even if there is no God. That was the meaning of the word or the phrase et si Dios non diratur, even if there is no God. This implies that the wisdom of the ethical system, that is natural law, is valid and binding for the human person even if we bracket belief in God. So according to Saint Thomas Aquinas, even though we do not have that faith in God, we still have the ability to know what is good and wrong and know how to decide in certain situations where you know already what is the right thing to do. So those who came up with the expression este Dios non diratur do not advocate atheism or protest against the faith. They simply mean that the deposit of knowledge or the divine wisdom that comes to us as a natural law is valid in itself and is therefore the reasonable code of conduct even for a man of goodwill who may be without faith. So those people, even though they do not have that faith, even if they are not Christians, even they don't believe in God, still they have the ability to do what is right, because for Saint Thomas Aquinas, it is the natural law of doing what is good. So Saint Thomas Aquinas' natural law basis was the Christian faith. So let's proceed to the conscience and natural law. The natural law is an objective moral norm, while the conscience is the subjective human faculty that recognizes right and wrong, and thus bears witness to the person standing before the law. In other words, the natural law, it guides us in doing our natural tendencies in order for us to achieve the fullness of our nature, whereas the conscience is the instrument of God to continually guide us, despite our power to choose whatever we want. The ability of man to know is important in his or her acting ethically. Hence, if one follows St. Thomas' discussion on conscience, one is inclined to conclude that it is the proper functioning of reason in moving the human person forwards towards to an end goal that is fitting of his or her dignity. One cannot do the right thing if one does not know what it is. The famous dictate then to follow the conscience absolutely is tied to an obligation to educate it. If one does not know, he or she is obliged to know. If one acts badly out of ignorance and does not act to rectify the situation by bothering to learn, that person is to be held accountable according to the angelic doctor. So for Thomas Aquinas, our conscience is the one who will help us in terms of doing the proper function as a person and being able to have the goal in life. For Aquinas, one cannot do the right thing if one does not know what it is. Of course, if you do not know that thing, if you do not know if that is right or wrong, then you don't know what you are going to do. And if you don't know the right and wrong, you should educate yourself and have that knowledge what the right things to do. So while the conscience absolutely binds us in doing the good and avoiding evil, conscience as reason is also absolutely tasked to be given formation. The conscience, therefore, can be mistaken and being so thus not exempt the human person from culpability. If he or she is able to know but fails to act in his or her obligation to do so, then he or she is not free from blame and responsibility for what was done. We have to develop our thinking ability. We have to educate our conscience. Even if sometimes we do something that is not appropriate, we are still responsible for our action. No matter what, if we have that knowledge to know what is right and wrong, but still failed not to look for the answers in the situation to do what is right, then you are not free from blame. So there are different kinds of conscience that may lead us to a wrongdoing. The callous, the perplexed, the scrupulous, and the ignorant. The uninformed conscience simply lacks education, while the perplexed one needs guidance in sorting out one's confusion. The callous and the scrupulous are a binary opposites of, but both are malformed in being too lax and too strict. So callousness of the conscience result in the long-time persistence in doing evil. That self is no longer concerned whether what he or she does is good or bad. And also the scrupulousness, on the other hand, it fails trust one's ability to do good, and hence overly concerns itself with avoiding what is bad to the point of seeing wrong where there really is none. If one thinks about it, these different consciences that lead to the badness in action can readily be rectified by education. Putting an effort in forming one's own conscience helps a person to exit from such malformation. So for callousness, if you are immune of doing the wrong things, wherein for you it is good, you believe to yourself that you are right, that your decision is right even if it's actually wrong. And the scrupulousness, it fails to trust to one's ability to do good. You are very careful where you don't determine what is right and wrong. Like for the things you done that you thought or that I thought it was right, but it's really wrong. It is really, really wrong. So we should educate ourselves to make those things that we thought it was right, but unfortunately wrong. All we need to do is educate ourselves. That's the best things to do to avoid those wrongdoing of us. So conscience remains to be one proximate norm that bind us to do the good and avoid evil. Simply put, going against one conscience is doing the contrary of the dictate of what one knowingly elect as good. If the extent of what one knows determines what is good to be done and the evil to be avoided, the self is obliged to act accordingly. Act on the good and shun the bad. This occasion again shows the importance of the commitment to educate one's conscience. Basically, because one cannot do a good if one does not know if, and since one's norm for acting is the obligation that is set by one's conscience. So according to Saint Thomas Aquinas, we don't have the right to control our conscience because our conscience will tell us what is the right thing to do or wrong things to be avoided. We know to follow that our minds tell us. We have to follow also. Our conscience is telling us. So this conscience is always telling us what is good thing to do in that situation. And if we make sure what is wrong, we will be able to avoid that and make it the right thing. Conscience is the act of applying our general knowledge of good and evil to what we do or might to do. So in order to naturally know what is a good action or bad one needs to understand at a general or universal level how things are naturally ordered by God. Primarily, what human nature is and what things it needed and deserves. The understanding of this order which dictates what is good or evil behavior is called the natural law by or according to Aquinas. And all rational people can and do acquire it simply in virtue of being rational. So some people, however, can so obscure their grasp of the natural law through morally bad actions that it becomes as true they forgot what is right and what is wrong. So God can and does also supernaturally reveal at the same time generally or universally level what is and is not in accordance with His will through His revelation in Scripture, the 10 Commandments and Christ's 2 great commandments. So let's proceed now to the relational and perfection of love in Aquinas. Although we have suspended God talk to make the case that naturally law is relevant, even for the human person without faith, the discussion of domestic ethics is incomplete if it does not end with the love that is directed towards God. So according to Saint Thomas Aquinas, we have that ability to do good even though we are not faithful, and that the natural law of a human being to do what is good. So domestic natural law is not Christian simply because it is an ethics reconcilable or compatible with faith. It is a discipline system that finds ultimate foundation and perfection in the reality of God. Ultimately, this ethics is given full meaning and perfection in a relationship with God. And the natural law has nothing to do with religion because for Saint Thomas Aquinas, we are able to do that good things even if we do not have that faith in God. We have that autonomy to do what is good, and we are independent from faith. We can do good things freely. Any one of us can be a good person even if he or she don't believe in God or not belong to any religion. So through personal reflection, decision, goal setting, and praxis, the human person attains to full realization of who he or she is. In this sense, the human being is not merely a stand-in for the Creator God. One is not a robot who learns the direction from everything else and applies it to oneself to function as a tool of Deus ex machina, or the God of the machine. The subjectivity of a man and one's search for fulfillment really rests on the decisions and voluntarily willing that one makes. As a human being, we have that freedom to choose what is right and what is not right. We are not created like a machine. we have the independence to do those ethical things and to be that specific person that we want to be real, to be who we are, because we have that ability to be the best version of ourselves. So according to Saint Thomas Aquinas, we created in this earth not to be a machine, but a person who can do what we want to be, because we have that freedom to do the right things. And for the conclusion, Saint Thomas Aquinas was influential in his articulation of the theory of natural law. He showed us that the universe was determined by an order of love that ought to define the sense of the good of human beings. Whether one believes in a transcendent, loving God or not, he showed how people could intuit an order to things that was inherent to all beings, that is, existed. Whether one was a believer or not, one could see that there is an order which is the ground of people's wholeness and the self-realization. And that's all. Thank you and God bless everyone, especially to you, ma'am. Thank you for listening.